Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our June Eggs and Issues. We're very glad to be able to see all of your faces, even if we can't physically be present together. This morning, I would like to introduce our sponsor. Our sponsor today is Wing. And Jacob Demmett, who is marketing and outreach for Wing, is going to tell us a little bit about them.
Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody joining. My name is Jacob. I work with Wing. I've lived in the area since 2013, so a lot of you might know me. And then last year I joined Wing kind of before all the excitement got started. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so quick background on Wing in case you guys haven't heard about us. So we are an Alphabet subsidiary that was founded in 2012. So that makes us a Google sister company. We do drone delivery on 4 different continents, and we've completed over 100,000 flights to date. And then on October 18th of last year, all the news crews came to town as a really big fun event, and we launched America's first on-demand residential drone delivery service here in Christiansburg. And so that's what we've been doing ever since. So customers use the app and they place orders, and then we deliver products to their house via drone. The first and only place in the United States where that kind of service is available. And so after we launched, we immediately saw this trend of people using us in times of need when they couldn't leave the house. Maybe they were busy or they had kids, broken leg, somebody told us. We saw all sorts of times when people were turning to drone delivery when it was hard to leave the house. And then COVID-19 came, and all of a sudden it went from being that some people couldn't go to the store sometimes to all of us couldn't go to the store most of the time. And so the situation really changed, and we saw drone delivery as a real opportunity to help in that time. So if you go to the next slide. So kind of what we did, so we all got together and we started thinking of different ideas, ways that we could help and use drone delivery kind of during this time of quarantine, these times of need. And so at the top there, those are our original partners. Those are the companies that we launched with, and they're still on the platform and doing great. The customers really have enjoyed their offerings. So FedEx is we deliver regular FedEx Express packages. They just get routed to us, and then they come via drone instead of on a truck. Walgreens, we have health and wellness products, over-the-counter medicines, things like that. And then Sugar Magnolia is Blacksburg shop. They have chocolates and stationery and diaries and calendars and things like that. So when we started thinking about other ways we could help, one of the areas that people have been telling us for a really long time would be fresh food and coffee. And so we partnered with Brew Coffee. We deliver cold brew coffee with them, and then also coffee beans, so you can kind of brew your own at home. Mockingbird Cafe, that's a shop in downtown Christiansburg. We have muffins, cookies, pastries, all sorts of things. And those are all baked fresh each day before we deliver them. And then we added Gran Rodeo, the Mexican restaurant it's located right next to our site, next to Charlie's and Hobby Lobby. And so we actually fly real fresh hot meals straight out of the kitchen. We put them on the drone, we fly them directly to your house. And so if you go to the next slide. So what did this look like for the customers? So during the COVID-19 outbreak, we saw about a 5x increase in orders from February to April worldwide, which was unexpected and really interesting to see, but it kind of goes back to that trend of people using us during times of need. So we kind of tracking our orders, and we were doing 1,000 a month, 1,000 every 2 weeks, 1,000, and then we hit 1,000 in a 7-day period. And so during those times, kind of some of the most popular items were cookies, cold brew coffee, toilet paper, kids puzzle games, and the super burrito from Gran Rodeo. Those were ranking kind of among our most popular items. And then around that same time, we saw a 350% increase in signups month over month. And so a lot more people were joining the platform so they could use it. If you go to the next slide, this is my favorite one. Really at the end of the day, so kind of being able to help small businesses is a core component of what we do. we think that drone delivery will help businesses connect with more customers in the future, where you won't be confined by just who can come to you. And so we're really seeing that right now. So Brew Coffee, they're selling about twice as much cold brew coffee now via drone delivery than they were selling in store even before COVID. And then Mockingbird Cafe has told us that drone delivery is making up about 25% of sales during this time. Is that the silver bullet that fixes everything? Absolutely not. We definitely understand that. It's kind of one piece of the puzzle. But these businesses have told us that it's really helped them kind of be able to reach their customers during this really hard time when they've had to close their store to walk-ins. And so we're really happy to be able to do that. And so that's kind of it for us. That's just wanted to give a quick update. I can kind of hang on and later, if anyone has any questions, I can, happy to do that. Do you want me to introduce Mark now? Happy to do that.
Yes, please, that'd be great.
Yeah, awesome. So, Mark Blanks, he's going to be the main speaker today. So he leads Virginia Tech's Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership, which is the arm of the university that does drone research. MAAP and Wing have worked together since 2016, at least, and they've been kind of really crucial to everything we do. They're the ones that introduced us to Southwest Virginia, and then I think it's safe to say that the trial and the service that we have here in Christiansburg today would not be the success that it is right now without Virginia Tech, without MAAP's help. They've been kind of every step of the way from launch through everything we've done since then. They've been amazing partners, and Mark's been really great to work with. So I will hand it over to Mark.
Thanks, Jacob. I appreciate it. Just make sure everybody can hear me okay. I get a thumbs up from someone. Okay, there we go. I got it. Okay, so you got me. All right, so I really do appreciate the opportunity to come speak again to you guys. I think I presented exit issues sometime last summer before we launched the Wing drone delivery that Jacob just discussed, and it's a pleasure to be back again. Wish it was in person. Wish we could enjoy this company and fellowship there, but it is what it is. So today I'm going to talk to you, and I was asked to speak about kind of the broader drone market, not just about Wing, but about what the current and future of drones looks like, and perhaps some of the parts that will play out here locally. So you can go to the next slide. And I apologize, I got quite a few slides here, so you might hear me saying next slide a lot. But I'm going to be talking about a topic that I'm pretty passionate about. I call it drones are growing up, because I think that is exactly what's happening. It's a maturing of the technology that's beginning to really keep moving faster and faster. And so I'm going to give you a background of where we've been, where we are now, and what the future looks like as well. Before I get started, I'll first give you some background on us, just to make sure everybody remembers who we are beyond the initial introduction. So you can go to the next slide, and then quickly on to the next slide, I would imagine. So first of all, MAAP, or the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership, we're both a UAS test site and an integration pilot program location. So what that means is we have 2 FAA designations that are unique, and there's only 2 other states in the country that have them, us, North Dakota, and Alaska. There's 7 test sites, and I think there's 9 integration pilot programs now. And if you go to the next slide briefly, there's a pretty substantial difference between the 2, though. The one common thing is both of these programs come with 0 funding, which is always wonderful. We've had to make it go without the money, which has actually worked out quite well as well. But first of all, as a test site, we do all kinds of different open-ended testing and evaluation. We test all kinds of different technologies, from injury risks to human beings to software that's been developed, air traffic control systems that are automated, you name it, a little bit of everything, and kind of free reign to do whatever we want there as far as testing goes. When I say do whatever we want, I mean any topic that we want to test. We do have a lot of safety and regulations we have to follow. The integration pilot program, though, was very narrowly focused on 3 specific projects. Those, Wing is one of those, doing package delivery, as well as State Farm doing damage assessment, and then Dominion Energy doing linear infrastructure inspection. And really the goal there was to accelerate those 3 projects and investigate the role that the state and the local government plays in drone regulation as we integrate this into the community. What does it really look like to innovate in the community? And that's what we've been doing with Wing here in Christiansburg, and has just been a blast, and very happy with where that's going. But we're going to talk a little more about some of the broader portfolio. So you can go ahead. The next section is called "What We Do," and I think that we can skip on to the following slide for that. So just here's an overview of just a random sampling of what those projects look like to show you that it is more than drone delivery. Obviously, we have Wing on the left side there. This was actually during some testing they were doing before the launch of their operation in Christiansburg. In the top, there's a test we're doing with NASA, testing airborne radars, another injury test of testing the crash of a drone against a human. By the way, when we do that injury testing, we also work with manufacturers often to redesign the aircraft to make them more and more safe, even though the expectation is they won't fall out of the sky. If they did, we want to make sure that they would also be as safe as possible, and that's the purpose of that research. We also do a lot of work with ground-based sensors, which is the bottom right, the radar system that we were fortunate to be funded by the state to purchase, where we're using radars to help separate manned and unmanned aircraft. You can go to the next slide. And there's just more pictures of additional testing. This is State Farm on the bottom left side. They're doing some of their initial training and testing, more Wing tests and more injury testing. You can skip on again though to next slide. So I'm going to back up and give you kind of an overview of where we've been and where we are now, and what's holding us back, and how we're overcoming that, and what's coming in the future. So you can go to the next slide. And first of all, the point I want to make is we have come a long way. A lot has changed. I've been in this industry for a little over 10 years, which is like a lifetime. You know, it's kind of dog years. They do measure drone years. You know, multiply your regular number of years by 5 or 7 or 10. The things change quite a bit. But you know, when I got into the industry, aircraft looked very much like the top left one there, highly customized, modified remote control aircraft that were very difficult to fly and build, and were not widespread. And then we saw the launch of the autopilot on the bottom left, which is a Pixhawk open source autopilot, helped make the aircraft simpler to fly than they had ever been. And then we saw consumer drones like DJI Phantoms and others, which is the top right, come out and really make it simple for the average person to operate. The bottom right one, though, is a good example of a professional drone, which is designed for public safety use, law enforcement, and search and rescue use. And it's a 6-figure cost, small quadcopter. It's not something that someone would buy individually, but is very rugged, very automated. So it's in just such a short amount of time, we've gone from very basic technology, well, it's still advanced, but very basic relative to today technology, to things that are very professional, purpose-built, designed to perform a specific mission and do that very, very well. And that's fantastic. Go to the next slide, please. The interesting part really happened, though, when Part 107 came out. Part 107 is the FAA's commercial rules for drone operations. This was a rule that was finalized in the very end of 2016, or latter part of 2016. And we call it Part 107 because that's the name of the chapter of the regulation that it's in. The great thing about it was that it launched like what we would call true commercial operations. You can now charge money to go take pictures or to do other things. You could take revenue. Before that time, if you were charging money to do drone flights, you were technically doing an illegal operation. So this made all that possible. And it created just an untold number of companies. The surge of companies that came out right after that, Part 107, was just amazing to watch. They sprouted everywhere. We started to see that what was possible with Part 107. You can go to the next slide. Some of the challenges, though, is that it really just whet the appetite of the market. Part 107 was the first rule, but it came with a lot of limits that allowed the aircraft to fly, but not to do all the things you might want to do with them. Specifically, you could not fly beyond visual line of sight. So you had to stay where you could see the aircraft, and you couldn't fly over people. You had to guarantee you didn't fly over people. Now, people violate that all the time. Just be aware, if you see a drone flying over your head, other than Wings and a couple of others out there, most of them are not approved to fly over people. And so we really need to be able to do a lot more than what we could do under Part 107. And that's the kind of the phase we've been in since shortly after September of 2016. Is it very shortly after that, we found that everybody wanted to do more. Thankfully, the FAA did have some waiver provisions in there to allow us to waiver things or get waivers and exemptions to certain parts of the rule. But we still don't have another rule after this that is broadened that substantially. And we'll probably talk more about that as well. And then you talk about why, though. So you can go to the next slide. So there have been sort of a number of barriers to integration, what we call integration of unmanned aircraft, barriers to the further growth of drones in the world. And you can go to the next slide. And specifically, what I want to talk today, this is more of a deep dive than you might want. I don't know, but it was also hopefully will be informative. That there are 4 specific things that are holding back the industry, and that is the technology maturity, operational maturity, the safety requirements, and then how the public perceives the industry and the technology. And all these 4 points are things that we've dealt with directly, for the past, let's see, we've been around since 2013, so past 7 years almost. So you can go to the next slide here. So, and by the way, if anybody has questions, I can see the chat window, so feel free to drop a chat question in there, and I'll try to stop while I'm doing the presentation if I can read and talk at the same time. We'll see how well that works, but feel free to send me a message. So, yeah, so there's a great question starting out. Why is the drone that was in the slide previously a 6-figure cost? In that case, it was because the aircraft was designed to be a military aircraft that was, or not military, public safety aircraft that was also used by military. It's actually been more used by law enforcement and by search and rescue. It was equipped with an infrared camera, and the camera alone is about a $20,000 camera. That was one piece of it. Also equipped with extremely high stabilization that at the time, so that came out in 2017 or a little before that actually. It was just a very rugged, well-packaged thing. Let's just put it this way, the consumer market hadn't got anywhere near where that was when it first came out. It's now a little bit older. That company has moved on to new designs since then. But it was, at the time, it was push button automation, take off, go to its mission, could fly in 30-mile-an-hour winds, fly in rain, any kind of weather. The capability of the aircraft was designed to be able to fly when no other aircraft could fly, and do all that automated with a push button and fly a very expensive camera. So that was the reason why it was so expensive. So let's talk about other speaking of technology, technology maturity. So what I'm calling nascent pre-certification technology is technology that's new, that hasn't undergone the same rigor that, for example, a manned aircraft would undergo when it's certified by the FAA. They have challenges with reliability and performance. Frankly, we've seen many different issues with reliability and performance of the aircraft over the past several years. We've had, I don't know, we've had probably 80 or 100 different aircraft designs come through our test site. It went one way, form, or another. Sometimes that's us buying them. Sometimes that's us building them. Sometimes that's companies bringing them for us to test. And there are a few that are just extremely reliable and extremely strong performance, but there are also many that don't have that because they're new and they're constantly evolving. And so with that, if we wanted to fly beyond visual line of sight and over people, we need to know that the aircraft is going to do what it's designed to do and always do so. So that's one of the reasons why we've had some barriers. We'll, I think, talk more later on about what some of the ways we are addressing that now. But that's one of the items we've seen. You can go to the next slide. Operational maturity, it's a term we use a lot. It's operational maturity or operational technology or operational procedures. May not be the most familiar term for everyone, but realistically, we found that many people see drones like they're toys more than as they're aircraft operating in our airspace where a lot of other manned aircraft are flying. And so that's actually more of a cultural type of issue with people treating them as toys and like Nerf guns. Like you can do whatever you want with them and not hurt someone. We end up with some casual attitudes that, quite frankly, can be hazardous and dangerous. That is another aspect. This is less of a problem in the commercial UAS market than it is with people to go buy them at Best Buy or Walmart or wherever. But it's still even an issue in some of the commercial drone operations. You can go to the next slide. Also, we didn't have safety requirements to really understand what was needed to fly beyond Part 107. If we wanted to fly with people, the FAA hadn't even told us what we needed to do. We, quite frankly, didn't even know. We had to present different manners of ensuring safety to the FAA and see how they responded to that and see if that addressed it. And that was also driven by the fact that the FAA didn't have data on what it was that was needed, and still doesn't have, in some cases, data on what's needed to go beyond Part 107. You can go to the next slide as well. And then one that we should definitely not overlook, because I think it's probably almost as big of an issue as anything, is public perception. I can very clearly remember, 2011, 12, if you mentioned the word drone, people would very immediately see a Predator aircraft dropping a bomb somewhere overseas. I do think that perception has changed dramatically since then, but for a good 5 years, I would not even use the word drone because we didn't want to be tied to that. We would always talk unmanned aircraft systems. Now I think that is getting better, just the connotation of what the name even means. But there's still a pretty large lack of familiarity of what the aircraft are, how they work, what are they doing. It's the unknown that has fueled the public anxiety. And that's been a key topic we've addressed with Wing. We've been communicating with the community, being out and about quite routinely when we were allowed to be, presenting and talking about the technology. So you can go on. We're going to talk, I think, about all of these and kind of how we're responding to them. So we have come to a turning point in recent years, and in particular the past year. I think things have dramatically changed, as seen by some of the new operations, but we'll get into that too. So next slide. So I mentioned earlier that one of the big issues was technology maturity, and that we were struggling with understanding how things would be reliable and how we were going to prove safety. But that's changed because we've been able to collect the data that we needed to make provide that proof. Because of that, we've been able to get to these groundbreaking national approvals. When I'm speaking on that, I'm speaking about State Farm was the first company to receive approval for beyond visual line of sight operation and over people across the entire country. And that was so they could respond to natural disasters and catastrophes. We've also seen the major approvals for drone delivery, as mentioned earlier by Jacob. Drone delivery, required many different, processes to go through for proving the aircraft was reliable and safe. And Wing spent years and worked with us and worked with others and worked around the world, providing data and evidence to show how safe that design was. And it also has led to kind of a pipeline or a pathway to how we would receive new approvals coming down the road. So that's all because we've been able to collect data. Now the FAA has also created a new process for certifying unmanned aircraft. It's something that's tailored specifically to them, and that's still in development, but it's actually actively being used. And there are a number of companies that are working with the FAA right now to certify their aircraft. And in that case, they will be exactly the same as certification as what you have for an airliner that you go step onto and take off and fly. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. In addition, we are also seeing that the operations are maturing. I mentioned that we have a lot of lax, casual attitudes. People treat them as toys, et cetera. There have been oftentimes treated in a less than professional manner. Well, the examples that think operations are actually truly maturing are with the issuance of the first air carrier certificates. Wing was issued the very first one in April of last year on the 21st. UPS was later issued one in September. And this is a really, really big deal. If we have Part 107 is what most people fly under. Part 135 is what Wing and other drone delivery companies are operating under. And in Part 107, basically you go take a written test, and then you get a license and you can go fly under those rules. In Part 135, you have to have every single detail of the operation, from the part where the pilot gets trained, to how they're checked out, to the way the aircraft is designed, the way it's maintained, who's responsible for every aspect, the way you load packages, the software revisions, every single aspect of the company in operation is certified by the FAA. So they come in, they do a deep dive review of all those things, and then they continually monitor it, monthly, as long as you have that certificate. That air carrier certificate is the exact same certificate used by charter jet companies, as well as some regional airlines and others. It is basically an airline certification, if you can think of it that way. So with Wing getting the first air carrier certificate, they got also the first ever certified pilot to operate under Part 135, the first ever director of maintenance for unmanned aircraft, a number of other firsts just in the organization. And that's looks much more like an airline, and therefore looks much more what I would call like a normal aviation. This is a big key to drones are growing up, is that they are now functioning like a normal airline would function. And it was quite a feat to get through all that process. So you can go on to the next slide. So we've also have seen some movement in understanding what kind of data the FAA did need for expanding operations. I mentioned before that we were just providing data and seeing whether or not it hit the mark. And sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. But now we are also seeing new rules being developed that will become official rules. These are both NPRMs, which means a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. It's a preliminary activity where the FAA publishes the rule for comment, they take those comments back, and then they later publish a final rule. So in February of last year, they published a rule to allow operating over people. And then they also published a rule in December at the end of last year on remote identification of the aircraft. And we expect that both of those rules will become final rules roughly towards the end of this year. They're also developing rules for expanding operations into more beyond visual line of sight work and a number of other areas. So the good thing there is now we're talking about having an actual benchmark of things we need to meet. Before we were guessing at what we need to do, not guessing, we do have a rigorous process, but we don't know what the threshold or the end line is. And we often call this rock management. I don't know if you've heard that before. It's where you bring a rock to the FAA and say, this is my rock and it's beautiful, we like it, and here's the data to back it up. And the FAA says, I don't like that rock, I want another rock. And you go bring another rock, and they say, I don't like that rock either, you bring another rock. And there's been a lot of that, a lot of rock management, and we've had a lot of success even within that. But now with these new rules, we're actually able to move away from that rock management type attitude. You can go on to the next slide. So we also needed to address the public perception. And as I mentioned, I think this is one of the biggest issues that we have. Once we get past the technology and everything else, if we can get it all approved and we can get everything certified, and we can take that out to the community, and if the community hates it, then it's not going to happen. It's not going to exist. So this is that piece where we have to make sure that we understand what the community needs, address those very seriously, take them on, and provide the greatest value to a community. So what we've learned, I think, through all of our outreach is that the perception of drones shifts really to appreciation from concern as they learn more, as the community learns more about the technology. It's the lack of knowledge, the lack of understanding of how things will be handled, how I'm going to ensure privacy, how I'm going to ensure safety. What is it going to look like in my community? What is that thing? It's the unknown that's scary. And with Wing, they were certified in April of last year, and then we spent several months before their October launch doing exactly that, getting out to the community. This is at the Touch a Truck event at the NRV Mall last year. Great event. I will just note that if you do get a tent there, it's great to not be right in front of the excavator with a really loud horn that's getting honked all day long, every day. That was rough. But But it was a great event just to get out and talk to people, as well as stepping out. And we've been to the mall, we've been all around, and try to be available for people to ask us questions. And that's a collaboration with Virginia Tech and with Wing together to help the community understand what's happening. And right now, I think we would still be doing this if we didn't have the COVID impacts. And so we're still trying to find ways to share with the community. I'm sure Jacob can talk to that later if you have questions about that as well. But really, like I mentioned, it is the unknown. This is challenging. We've got to make this technology familiar and help people to understand the value that it brings and how we're addressing any concerns that they might have. So those are some of the 4 things we've done that we have been we've made progress, but we do still have some work to do for sure, and that's where we started talking about the future and the things that are really going on now. So you can go on to the next slide. And so this is a bit into the weeds also, but at the same time, perhaps enlightening. That this is the biggest challenge we have is truly detect and avoid. So what does that mean? Detect and avoid is the ability for one aircraft to see another aircraft and get out of their way. This was the biggest problem when I got into this in 2009, and it's the biggest problem still, the biggest challenge still. There's a basic tenet of our national airspace that says that all pilots shall look out the window and separate themselves from other aircraft. If they see another aircraft, they're supposed to avoid them. It sounds like a simple concept, but let me tell you, I think billions of dollars have been spent on this problem and it's still not solved when you don't have the pilot in the cockpit. Very, very difficult challenge to be able to see and avoid other objects in the air. And so, a lot of our work at our test site here at Virginia Tech has been focused on this. These are 2 examples. The aircraft flying a radar onboarded. So the guy's holding the reservoirs drone on the left. That little white panel is an airborne radar. That was some tests we did with NASA. It was the first time that NASA had ever done true automated detect and avoid, where you push a button, the aircraft takes off, the radar sees another aircraft, the drone moves out of the way, and then returns back to on its mission with nobody ever doing anything else. So we're getting to that level of autonomy where a pilot's not having to manually maneuver the aircraft. On the right is the ground-based radar that can see a much larger area, but also obviously requires a lot more infrastructure. And we're testing that actually this week. We were testing the past couple of days, flying manned aircraft and drones against that as well. But it's still, this is the biggest challenge. And part of the problem is understanding the reliability of these technologies. They all have some challenges. Just to give you an example, this big radar on the right costs a ton of money. It's almost $1 million. And it works great. And then if it rains, we've had problems where every cloud, a lot of the moisture in the air would actually trigger a return, saying that's an aircraft. And suddenly it's raining and we have, 5,000 aircraft all right in front of us. What do you do with that kind of information? Very, very difficult problem to deal with. And so we have to adapt the technology to work in all different types of conditions. So you can go to the next slide. What I would call the second biggest, although it may someday become the biggest issue, is spectrum. It's the ability to communicate and talk with the aircraft. That is extremely challenging to do long distance. It's not a big deal when the drone is sitting right in front of you and you're looking at it and you can see it. But if you fly to 50 miles away, 100 miles away, even 5 miles away in most cases, there's not a good way to do that. Most of the radio communications between the drone and the ground are done with unlicensed spectrum, the same things where you have your Wi-Fi router operates on, and you're limited in how much power you can use to talk to the aircraft, how far you can go with it. Your Wi-Fi probably doesn't work 5 miles away. If it does, you have some really, really good Wi-Fi, and maybe breaking some FCC rules. But when we want to go long distance, we need that ability to talk to the aircraft and know we'll be able to talk to it always. The problem with spectrum is it's a limited, finite resource, and so there's everybody wants spectrum for something, for some new application or life critical application or whatever else it might be. And so we've had challenges getting approval for spectrum that can go really long distances. The example here is Dominion Energy's power lines. How do you fly 100 miles down a power line? One of the greatest solutions potentially is LTE, 4G and 5G cellular networks, because that actually is protected communication, protected spectrum. It's got rules that govern how it's used very carefully. And it is great. It works, it has a lot of bandwidth, a lot of high throughput, but the problem is it's not everywhere. And it certainly isn't in Dominion Energy's lines outside of Farmville, Virginia. I mean, it's very, very great in urban areas and suburban areas, but not as good out there. So we're doing a lot of work on this topic right now as well, of working on getting spectrum for dedicated for drones that can be used and tested and approved long term. And I see a few questions are rolling in since they're going, and I'm having trouble of talking and reading. I'm going to wait, and I'll grab them at the end if that's okay. Okay, you can go to the next slide. The other one is this routine operations over people. Both of these operators, State Farm and Wing, are approved to operate over people. They're one of a handful in the country that are approved as such. And that took a lot of testing, a lot of development, a lot of work, providing data to the FAA to show that the systems were safe. The key here is going to be that new rule that the FAA is releasing when it comes out as a final rule. But also that new rule will probably only allow really small drones to fly over people. What we really are interested in is the bigger aircraft. And that is going to be approved through, and is currently being worked through, type certification. That's the idea of certifying the drone, the actual aircraft itself, in the same way you would certify a manned aircraft. And I think I spoke to that briefly earlier. But this is another key enabler. So if we can do detect and avoid, we can get spectrum to talk to the aircraft, and then we can fly over people, and then that's most of the way there to being able to do all the things that drones can do. And all of those areas have a lot of work ongoing in them. One unique difference between the rule that the FAA is putting out and type certification is the rule is designed to say that basically if this drone hits you, it will not hurt you. And so that's the safety aspect there. Type certification is saying the aircraft will never hit you. The aircraft is so reliable, it will never come out of the sky, it will never hit you. The same way that you say, a Cessna 172, if it hits you, it's going to hurt. But it's not going to hit you because it's certified and it's reliable, and it's not going to fall out of the sky. You can go on to the next slide. Make sure I get to some questions here in just a moment. And then the final enabler, and this actually goes back to public perception and to a lot of other items, is remote identification. And this is the idea of being able to, a person on the ground, being able to stand on the ground, see a drone flying, and somehow be able to identify what is that aircraft, who's operating it, and why is it there. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is the community perception. There's other concerns, certainly from law enforcement, about how drones can be used in a negative way. This rule came out, or this proposed rule came out in December, and there's basically right now two ways of doing this. One is through software, so that basically there's an app or a website or whatever else you go to on your phone, and you're able to see an aircraft, look at your phone, and say, oh, that aircraft, the drone flying over me is so-and-so. You can click on it. That is similar to some technology called FlightAware, and there's a couple of others that you can currently use to track manned aircraft. And that's called network remote ID. There's also the idea of broadcasting a signal straight from the drone that is received by your phone or tablet or whatever that device might be. It has to be something that everybody has, or essentially everybody has. The basic problem here is that a Cessna flying over, or any kind of manned airplane flying over, has big 12-inch tall tail numbers on it. You can read that number visually and look it up to see who it is. You cannot visually read the registration number on a drone that is a quarter of an inch tall. So that's the big key difference here. This is something we worked on with Wing, and the Wing has a great network remote ID type of technology, and there's benefits to both different types of technology, but at the end of the day, what we need is the ability to identify unmanned aircraft that are flying in the airspace. Anybody be able to identify them, but especially the public and law enforcement. All right, you can go to the next slide. So let's talk about the future. And this is my last slide, other than I think a question slide and some stuff with contact info. What does the future look like? I would first of all propose that you are seeing more of the future in Montgomery County than you're seeing anywhere else in the country, period. There is nowhere else in the country where what you're seeing is happening, that's what's happening here in the same manner as somewhere else. And that's the ability to on-demand order products for to help your daily life by drone. I mean, that's just simply not happening elsewhere. So one of the things that the future is going to look like is to see that in other places. That may or may not benefit you, but we have that already. But we do expect that to grow and expand. And so I think you will certainly see that type of technology growing, as well as other applications that directly impact and directly benefit you. I mean, with what the work State Farm is doing as that matures, they're doing claims. If you have hail damage to your roof, or you have a tornado come through and hits 100 houses, the direct benefit the drones bring is to see claims processed for that in a matter of hours or days, when they might have taken days or weeks or years in some cases. So it's bringing direct value and impact to the community. The big thing on the horizon, though, that everybody's talking about, and I may be a bit of a pessimist about, is the idea of flying people on drones. And it was called urban air mobility. Now it's called advanced air mobility, because they don't want to limit that just to urban areas. But put this picture in your mind of you calling up your Uber cab by air, and you literally say, come to me by air. And you go get on this drone, and it flies you to where you were going, and say it's Northern Virginia, in a matter of minutes, when it might have taken hours to get between the 2 points. That vision, I think, is still pretty far off, although we will see some continued testing of different concepts with it. And we expect that, or at least I expect that, within 10 years, you'll see at least some moderate level of that happening. The one thing I would point out, though, is we currently do have technology that already does that, which is called helicopters. And they're not normally used in that way because the cost is so high, and the noise is also so high. But there is promise that drones could bring the cost down and bring the noise down as well, and that is to be seen. But I do want to note that there are a lot of hurdles that remain. Those ones I identified earlier, and there are other ones as well. They still are there, and they're still going to be here for a while. And so the forecasts that see this happening at light speed, I think, are inaccurate. Uber predicted, I think, by 2023, or maybe it was 2022, that they would be flying regular routine passengers on drones. And I would be very surprised if that actually happens. But at the same time, as this technology improves, we will see more and more direct benefit to our daily lives. So I want to make sure I have some time here for these questions. I can't remember exactly what time I have to end at, so I'll go through these. And I see I've got a few from Joseph Rogers. I'll probably take one of yours and then skip down and take one of the others, and then maybe come back after that, if that works okay. Let's see, the first one that I haven't answered already is, does detection and avoidance technology rely on radar or object detection only, or are there identification transponders at play as well? So detection and avoid technology, there's actually many different ways of seeing other aircraft. Radar is one of the ones we've been testing the most because it seems to show some of the most promise for seeing other objects in aircraft that are not transmitting something. We call those non-cooperative. One of the great things about the US is you have the ability to go hop in your airplane and go fly wherever you want to go without talking to anybody. You don't have to have a radio in the aircraft. That's a great thing for freedom, but it's also a challenging thing to solve for as far as being able to see that Piper Cub that's flying around without a radio. So it makes it very challenging. But there are other technologies. There's acoustic, where you're actually listening for the other aircraft. And yes, they can do this from a drone that's making noise. They can hear another aircraft making noise. It's amazing. As well as visual means, using visual cameras to see, much like your eyes would. And then there are transponders. So we call this ADSB, which is Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. Not that you care about that, but anyway, it's a transponder that broadcasts a signal of the aircraft's location out as a beacon. And those are if another aircraft has ADS-B on it and is broadcasting that signal, it's a very simple problem to solve. But the problem is everybody's not required to have that. Inside of what we call Class Bravo airspace or Class B airspace near major airports like Dulles, Atlanta, Chicago, they are required to have those transponders. And so it's actually easier for us to separate from aircraft in really busy airspace than it is to separate from aircraft in low density airspace that we have around here. So when they're sending out a signal, we call them cooperative aircraft. That's a simple, relatively simple problem. And quite frankly, if everybody would be cooperative, then we would have solved this problem a decade ago. And so we are looking for ways to leverage that technology as much as possible. So hopefully that answers that. And actually, those all might be tied together as I'm looking at it. Those three questions, or two questions, might be tied together from Joseph. So Sarah has Montgomery County, Christiansburg, and Blacksburg governments been friendly and supportive of your efforts? Is there anything else that the local governments can do to help facilitate advancements? And thanks for what you do. Thank you. So Jacob, I may point to you after I speak to this briefly, if you have a second, because this is, I think, a team effort here. I would just say that broadly, the reception and the collaboration with the county and all the local government has been fantastic. They've been great to work with. They've asked real, honest, hard questions when they needed to. But they've been very, very open and willing to work with us to find ways to solve issues. But Jacob, I don't know if you want to make a comment to that or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so so all the local governments have been absolutely just completely fabulous to work with. We started this conversations kind of long before we ever started flying, and then we continue them regularly. So I guess the only request would be to keep the lines of communication open, keep talking to us. The localities, you guys know your constituents and you guys know your towns better than anybody else. And so you can kind of help us know how we're doing and tell us what we can do different and how we can kind of best meet the needs of these communities. So yeah, no, just keep talking to us and keep in communication. It's been great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jacob. And I would just note that, Wing could have gone anywhere in the country. They did not have to come to Christiansburg. They literally could have gone anywhere. And everybody wanted Wing, pretty much everybody. I know that I've heard many people wishing that they had Wing come to their local area. They came to Montgomery County and Christiansburg for a lot of reasons. One is certainly a strong collaboration with Virginia Tech. One is the community, and others the local government. I mean, it was really the whole package. It was just a great community. Broadly, from the technology aspect and research aspect of the university to the people that are in the community to the local government, everyone. And so it's just a testament, I think, to the strength of our county. And then Joseph once again mentions that there's currently a remote ID proposal from the FAA. It's not currently a regulatory requirement or not a requirement. That is true. That was that proposed rule that I mentioned. That is not a final rule yet. We do expect that final rule to happen towards the end of the year, and it would likely have a 2 to 3 year implementation phase where it's roughly the end of 3 years, everybody flying drones, even those you buy at Walmart, would have to be have the ability to be remotely identified. All right, let's see, going down the list. Another one from Sarah says, is there a way for the general public to know that the drones over their heads are Wings and State Farm? So the public doesn't call the police or deputy because some creep is scoping out a crime scene. Yes, so there are right now. First of all, Wings is very easy to identify. It's very unique. I don't expect that will stay that way forever. And there may be other aircraft that look like it, but the Wings aircraft is. We had some pictures earlier in the slide deck that showed it. In fact, the previous picture has one. Those aircraft just visually look very unique. We also do the outreach aspects, and then we are working on this remote ID. I mentioned remote ID. We've been trialing and trying out that technology. It hasn't rolled out in a final form yet, but that will be coming very, very soon. So right now, our strategy is to share that information through outreach and describe. I'll show you what the aircraft looks like. You can, if you see it, you know why it's there, and that goes to the same that's true for State Farm. State Farm is a bit more challenging just because they fly at a much higher altitude. In fact, you probably would never even see it. And it also looks like a bird, but they also don't know where they're going to go. They go where a disaster hits. So it's hard to do outreach, for a long time in advance when you don't know where the tornado is going to hit. For example, they were in Nashville for a week after those tornadoes, surveying that, and we had no plans for them to fly in Nashville, or they had no plans to fly in Nashville beforehand. So that is a bit of a challenge, but we're doing the best we can until we have that remote ID rule and technology in place. Just want to skip over, just come back to you because let's make sure that a couple other people get their questions addressed. Laurie here says, has the delivery area expanded? And if not, when do you anticipate this will happen? Jacob, you're the expert to talk on that, so I'll let you speak to that if it works.
Yeah, so the delivery area is roughly still what it was when we launched. We've added more people within the existing footprint. So right now we deliver within about a little over 3 miles of our site, located right next to Gran Rodeo. So if you live in that area, then you're in the zone. So it'd be kind of down to Christiansburg High School, and then out toward like Belmont Christian Church, and then kind of all those neighborhoods around there. So that's the current footprint. As far as kind of the future expanding, it's a complex question. It's a hard thing. So we definitely want to. It's just we have to kind of take it one step at a time and see. So no firm answer on that.
All right, thanks, Jacob. And just like I mentioned before, the Wings operation is very heavily engaged with the FAA. So any changes they make is a lot of coordination and other things, and they've just been great to work with. And I do hope we'll see that expansion here soon. So just rolling through questions. Question from Montgomery County Chamber. I don't know if that's Josie here. Who exactly says, Mark, we know public safety and law enforcement are using the technology. How are they licensed? They are usually flying into the same rules as other commercial operators are, Part 107, the one that I described earlier. So that usually means that they also can't fly beyond visual line of sight or over people. But there are some exceptions to that. I mentioned some waiver authority. There's quite a few law enforcement entities that have received waivers from the FAA to expand that operation to flying beyond line of sight and over people. Our local groups that I know of here, I think most all of them are flying just under standard Part 107. Stephen Tanner asks, why not require all manned aircraft ID if the goal is to require all drones ID? This, I think, goes back to what I mentioned about a manned aircraft. You do have an ability, if it is flying really low, to see the identification of the aircraft by being able to visually see the N number. If we could visually see an N number on a drone, there's probably less chance that we would have the concerns with remote identifying them that we'd have now. I think there's also some other aspects of this that manned aircraft or drones, or at least are perceived by certain intelligence agencies as being more of a security risk. Since there's not a pilot on board, people can do things with them that don't endanger themselves, so they can be used in a tool in a bad way, just the same way your cell phone can be used in a bad way, any other technology. So there are a number of different drivers, but I think one of the main things about manned aircraft identification is that there are current ways to identify them, at least for the most part. Not electronically in all cases, but if they're using a transponder like ADSB, you can also identify them in that area as well. Let's see. Let's see a question with that one. Okay. Tom from Sugar Magnolia says, Sugar Magnolia, we've been thrilled with our partnership with Wing. From our perspective, public perception has been overwhelmingly positive. How has perception changed now that we're some 7 months into the operating delivery program and we're only seeing positive perception? Is there still negative being heard? I might also point to Jacob on this one as well, but I will note that I think we see the same thing, the positive perception broadly. Overall, the community has been very positive even from the beginning. And even more so as you introduce things. But in the pandemic times, the value only increases for contactless delivery. And so I would say only seeing an increase in perception. Jacob, though, I'll let you also make any comments there.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And I'd also say that we've really enjoyed working with Sugar Magnolia as well, Tom. Thanks so much. Sugar Magnolia was our first partner, first local business, first small business to do drone delivery in the United States, which is pretty cool. And they've been great to work with since day one, and continuing. So perception, like Mark said, when you kind of enter a time of need where most people are trying to limit trips outside their house, and they're still able to get the things they need, it only improves. So yeah, the public perception is still completely overwhelmingly positive. Christiansburg community has been really great to work with. So we have a very good home. We're very happy.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate it. Next question is, what are the delivery charges for a typical item, say coffee? I believe right now there are no delivery charges for any of these items. Is this correct, Jacob?
Yep, that's right. So you just pay the price of the goods, which is similar to what it would be in store, and then we fly it to your house for free.
Okay.
So
And Mark Hollingsworth, sorry.
I was gonna say, you can get a super burrito delivered to your house hot from Gran Rodeo for like $9 or something like that.
If only you delivered to McCoy, that would be very helpful. That's where I live. Sorry. Okay, so Mark Hollingsworth says our U.S. team has a 107 certification and also COA through FAA. That's a good reminder. So law enforcement and public safety can fly Part 107, but they are usually, because I know of, are public entities. That means they can fly as a public aircraft or public agency. There are different rules for public agencies, and in fact, that's what we fly as at Virginia Tech in a lot of cases, not always. But we will also operate under public aircraft rules. Essentially, that allows the government entity to determine airworthiness of the aircraft, and does allow us to expand and do some things beyond what Part 107 has. And so, yes, there are public safety agencies can also use that authority besides just getting waivers to 107. So there are a couple of different ways to do so. That is also reviewed, as Mark pointed out, by the FAA. Oh, it looks like, Jacob, you answered that down the road. Sorry, I hadn't gotten through all the questions. Looks like you answered the charge delivery piece here. So I want to skip to Scotty here just because I haven't heard this name yet. Pleasure seeing everyone yet, and have Zoom to another meeting. Jacob, I don't know if you want to take Kirk's other question that says, does the seller pay a fee, or how is the operation funded? That's up to you.
Yeah, no, the sellers don't pay a fee. So right now, so this is first in the United States. So kind of during this initial trial phase, it's really about learning from the community and kind of offering this service and delivering the best service that we can to people right now. And then we'll kind of, in the future, kind of take it one step at a time in terms of figuring out that side of things. But yeah, no, to answer your question, no, the sellers don't pay and there's no charge for delivery.
The next question here is, or this would be the last question just because of the timing here. What is your favorite success story of drone use locally or nationally? Finding lost person delivery truffles. I mean, I'll be honest, I can't think of a better success story than what's happening here locally. I mean, yes, there are a lot of great stories actually out there with drones. A lot of, helping rescue a lot of people. But to me, what I'm loving about this locally is helping a larger community, not just one particular company or operation or person. It's actually benefiting, I think, the community in a lot of different ways. And to me, that's why it's my favorite story. Certainly have seen other stories and witness other aspects where we've seen the great value of what drone technology can bring, but this is still my favorite. You can go to the next slide there. Sorry, I mentioned that was the last question there because I think, had to end this by 8:59. We're at 8:58 here. I did want to make sure that you had my contact information. Feel free to call or email me, whatever else you might need. If you have questions about our program, the future of drones, idea you have, almost anything, just really enjoy being in this community and appreciate all the work the chamber is doing to help the community and the businesses herein. So I think that's it for me. Oh, you're on mute, I believe. Sorry.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for all of the information that you shared and the time that you spent with us this morning. Jacob, we love having you as backdoor neighbors. And Mark, thank you for all of the information and getting all of us continue to be excited about all of the innovation that's happening in our backyard. Thank you again to Wing for their sponsorship of today and all of your support of the Chamber and the community. We hope y'all have a great rest of your week. We will have another virtual Eggs and Issues in July, so stay tuned for information about that. And as always, please make sure that you're checking out our Facebook page and the Facebook group to share what you're doing as your business, especially as we continue the excitement of reopening. Thank you again for your time this morning. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.